Hello everyone, this is going to be a lecture that I was going to give on Monday, and it's an overview of the whole research report, and it's going to help you a lot in figuring out what to do for each section. I'm going to review what the research report overview says, and also where to find various things, including how to submit the report, how to write your discussion, and then finally I will talk a little bit about plagiarism again, just a quick overview of that. So you can skip over whatever you like, but the beginning is going to be frequently asked questions. These are questions I've been getting a lot of emails about, and I will refer you back to this PowerPoint and this lecture. And in addition to this recording on Moodle, I'm also going to have the video, the PowerPoint, this PowerPoint up on Moodle for you in case you need anything. So there's going to be an overview of each of the sections of your research report, including what to put in your appendices, and a revision of not plagiarizing, because some of you had a little problem with that in the critical review, and I want to just make sure that you know how to not do that again. So some frequently asked questions. First question is, how do I format my research report? People have been asking me about that. Well, in addition to the research report overview, which has some formatting details in it, I've also put in an example of formatting for you on Moodle. So if you go to Moodle, you go to the research report materials. Now you can see here that there is this thing called report formatting guide. You can click on that, and it's going to show you how to do the formatting. So this is, the abstract, the introduction, and also what's going to be in the appendices. And this is obviously going to be different for all of you, but this is kind of just an example of what it should look like. So I posted that up for you. You can see it, and I'll also put that in a message to you all. Anyway, moving on. So that is the first question. How do I format it? That's available for you. How many faces do I show each participant? I did go over this a couple of times in lecture. If you're doing something like with attractive faces and unattractive faces, or if you're doing something with a woman wearing a headscarf or not wearing a headscarf, you show that's the independent variable would be attractiveness, or the independent variable is wearing a headscarf. You show one group of people one image and another group of people another image. Thus, you will only be showing each group of people one face, not both faces. That's how everything's set up to do. Some people have been asking, can I use my own survey or questionnaire, or do I use the ones that you provided? That seems strange to me. The surveys and questionnaires I provided, they're already there. They're validated. They're used in different literature. They have all the scoring guides available for them. You're meant to use them. I included everything for you to use. I don't know why you would use your own questionnaire or make up some questions, but some of you have asked to do that. It's just going to depend. If you have a research report where you made up your own thing, that's going to be less good than if you use something that I provided, because essentially it's going to be less scientifically valid because these other surveys have been validated and the scales have been tested. So if you've already done some data collection, it doesn't doom your mark, but it's obviously better to use the things that I provided. How many questions do I need to include? As I said in the last lecture, there's not a set number of questions you need to include. I gave you all a questionnaire. Essentially, this whole research report I've put together, the materials, and you just picking and choosing what you include and what you don't include. And it's just going to depend on what you think is important in terms of what you should include. So that's, as to what you think is important. Obviously, age and sex and participant number are all there. But it's going to depend on, for example, with spatial rotation, some of the literature said that a handedness mattered, whether you're left-handed or right-handed. It's up to you whether you're going to include that. And so that's up to you. But we will see what questions you included in the appendices, as I'll go over in a second. What do I have to include in my appendix? I'm going to go over this in a minute in really a lot of detail. You do not have to include all the consent forms that you collected. We just said that you should hold on to those because we might look later and see that if you collected all the data that you said you collected, but you don't have to include all the consent forms. You just include the templates of everything that you included. So that would be, you include the template of your consent form, the template of the questionnaire you used, the template of the vignette or whatever experimental thing that you used, all of that stuff. We want to know what the packet that you gave to participants looked like. And in addition, a couple other things. You'll also include a screenshot of your data And that's it. So that's all the stuff that you will include. Where do I use participant numbers? Well, there's been some confusion about this because there's no space for it on the debriefing form, or there is a space for it on the debriefing form. It doesn't really matter where you use participant numbers so long as you use them on the questionnaires and you have participant numbers, because the participant numbers is how the spreadsheet counts your participants. So, and you also are going to be connecting all of the questionnaires based on participant numbers. So the background questionnaires are connected by participant number to the whatever dependent measure questionnaire that you have collected. And you're going to submit your research report with Turnitin. And I put the Turnitin up just now. So the Turnitin is available here. If you go to the research report, and it says submit the electronic copy of your research report here. That's right under research report materials. You click there, and then you can see there's the research report submission available for you. So, and it also has instructions on everything that you should submit. Remember that you're going to be submitting a hard copy to the level 4 coursework box, the same place that you submitted your critical review, and you're going to be submitting it also electronically. And it's due on, as I recall, March 23rd, 2016. Let me check on that actually really quickly. Yeah, March 23rd, 2016 at noon. So that's exactly a week from now. All right, so that is the frequently asked questions, and I hope that helped. If you have any other questions, there's obviously going to be meetings next week for you to meet with Eglantine or Joe if you need any extra help. Now I'm going to go over the sections of your research report really quickly and put some special emphasis on the discussion, because the discussion is going to be what I haven't gone over yet. So the sections of your research report. First of all, the title. So the title needs to be summarized simply, clearly, and concisely, the main idea of your study. Do not use an overly long title. It should be something like 10 to 12 words, and you can browse journal titles to get a feel for good and bad titles. So it'll be something like a comparison of hiring practices of women wearing and not wearing a Muslim hijab, or not hiring practices, a comparison of the likelihood of hiring a woman wearing a hijab or not wearing a hijab, or the influence of attractiveness in ratings of guilt for putative exam cheating, or something like that. It's up to you, really, what you do, but it should have a good summary, the research report. Anyway, that is the title, and that's pretty straightforward. Then you're going to have the abstract, which should be a short summary. I mean, basically, this is just summarizing what's in the report overview. The abstract is a short summary between 100 and 150 words, and the abstract should succinctly and clearly summarize the problem under investigation and the objective of the study, the main method used, the number of and key information about the participants, the major findings of the study in words. So the only number that can be in your abstract really should be the number of participants. You should not have the t value or the p value in your abstract. And then you'll also have the conclusion from these findings, what you concluded, which I'm going to go over in a little bit more detail later about how to actually make sense of your findings and put them in the discussion. The abstract should make sense on its own, and you might want to write the abstract last because it has all the information for you there. So that's how to write the abstract. And there are, all of the journal articles that you were looking at have an example of an abstract. You can see them. Those are really good examples for you to use. I've gone over the introduction a lot, but the introduction is going to provide a reader with an introduction to the aims, background, research, and rationale. It refers to the background material. This is going to be a little bit like a very short version of your critical review introduction. Don't get sidetracked with issues that are not relevant to the study. You only have about, at most, 400, 500 words to write the introduction. And the key to successful introduction is good organization. So you don't want to repeat yourself. You don't have the words for that. You want to stay in the word count. By the way, regarding word count, that's another frequently asked question. The word count does not include the appendices and does not include the references. It is just the body of the research report. So that is the entire research report. And if you're over by a little bit, especially if it's the abstract, that's not a big deal. Don't worry about that too much. So you want to have the introduction just make sense and say, okay, this is what we were interested in. This is some studies that have been done before. This was our hypothesis. This is, that kind of thing. And then you're going to go right into the method section, where it described what you did in enough detail that someone else could replicate your study exactly. That is the main thing about the method. You're going to describe what you did exactly, and it's going to include participants, materials, and procedure. And you're going to say how many participants you had, what sex they were, and then any other information that you think is relevant that you might have looked at. So how many were left-handed, how many were right-handed, how many people preferred cats and how many people preferred dogs, how many people were of different religions, that might be relevant depending on the study that you're doing, how many men and how many women there were, what course they were in. It's going to really depend on the aims of your research report, what information about participants that you include. But if you included background questionnaire about something, you might want to include information about that. And if you put that all into your Excel spreadsheet that I've provided you with, you'll see that it's all, it should be fairly easy for you to count these things up. Finally, then you're going to have your materials. What did you use to collect the data? And then finally your procedure. What did you do and how did you do it? So that's everything that you're going to put in the method section. This is, again, all pretty available for you. So as I said a second ago, you're going to describe the participants in your study, and then this allows the reader to assess how representative your sample is. It includes the age and the number of men and women overall and in each condition. That's basically it. So it's going to depend on what kind of information you want to include. With materials, you want to describe the materials that you use in your study. So if you use my background questionnaire, you don't have to actually cite me, but you can say we did some basic demographic questions, including age, whatever questions that you use, and then whatever measure you use. So if you use the Big Five questionnaire inventory, there's information on how to cite that. That's in that folder. If you use the empathy quotient questionnaire, if you use the spatial rotation task, if you use the, I'm just trying to think of, also an example of the sort of vignette that you might have used, that kind of thing. And by the way, in the report formatting guide that I've put up for you in the research report materials, that is an example of an experimental protocol. But obviously it would be different depending on what you were doing. It's just an example of how to format it. And you can also refer to the appendices in your materials if you want to. So you can say, we use the empathy questionnaire, see Appendix B. We asked some background questionnaires. We asked some background questions of participants, see Appendix C, for example. So that should be something that you can do in the material section so that somebody knows where to look for that. In the procedure section, you say summarize how the study was done from start to finish. We approached participants in the library or potential participants in the library, then they filled out a consent form, then they filled out the background questionnaire, then they were randomly assigned to get an attractive condition or an unattractive condition. Once they filled that out, they were then debriefed and thanked, that kind of thing. Or we looked for participants in a specific course. We were, depending on what you're doing, it's going to really depend on, it's going to change your procedure. Some of you did a procedure that was online. Oh, I should mention this. Some of you have been asking about collecting data online. I don't mind that you collect data online, but I can't really, offer a lot of support for that. So if you don't already know how to do it, I would really recommend, and if you haven't already done it, that you just do things with hard paper copies, because that's much more straightforward. And you're only collecting 30 participants, so it's not that big a deal. You want to specify the order that you gave participants the questionnaire and how long you gave them to fill everything out, if you timed it, and how did you control any confounds. So you can say, if you did do any control for any confounds, did you talk to people at the same time of the day? If there were two of you, did you have everybody collect? Did you guys evenly collect data from both conditions. That kind of thing is the kind of thing that you can say in the procedure if you want to, or if you think it's relevant. The results section I reviewed really intensively on Moodle. The results section, there's an example of what it should look like on Moodle already. There's a really long video about how to use the spreadsheet and everything. I won't tell you any more about that. That's all already available for you. Okay, the discussion is what I haven't gone over already. And this is what's really important. So in the discussion, the main purpose is to discuss what your findings show. So the discussion has a very straightforward format that you can use. First, you want to discuss your main findings. So you would say, for example, we found no difference in extroversion between people who prefer cats and people who prefer dogs. However, we had more men than women in one condition, so a third variable might have been responsible for our results. Or we found that people were less likely to hire a woman wearing a hijab than a woman who is not wearing a hijab, in line with previous studies. And that brings me to point number 2, which is that's how your findings relate to previous literature. So you would say, this is in line with previous literature, or this is not. So let's say you did not find a difference in personality between people who prefer cats and people who prefer dogs. You could say something like, we did not find any difference between people who prefer cats and people who prefer dogs, unlike previous studies of personality, for example. Or we found that attractive participants were just as likely as attractive people with attractive faces were no more likely to be thought guilty than people with unattractive faces, unlike these studies that showed that unattractive faces are more likely to get a guilty verdict. And then you can talk about how your findings relate to the previous literature. Smith and Wesson, 1998, found this similar result, that kind of thing. So you can relate it back to your introduction. You don't want to repeat yourself, but you do want to relate it back. Say, what are the strengths and the weaknesses of your study? So not just my sample was not representative. Obviously, your sample is not going to be representative of the entire world and the population, but your sample can be representative of people at Portsmouth or white people from 18 to 20 or whatever. So what were the strengths and weaknesses of your study? Maybe you did something wrong and you had a female face and a male face for the guilty versus not guilty study. So that could have been a potential confound. Or maybe you didn't control or ask people about their handedness when you were doing spatial rotation. In general, 30 people is not a huge sample size. So if you only collected 30 participants, you can always say that you had a small sample and perhaps you could have gotten a bigger sample. Or you could say something like, the study was conducted in a very noisy environment, and for that reason, it's possible that participants were distracted. Or it's possible that we ran participants too early in the morning. I mean, there's any number of different things that you did, so you can talk about that. You want to say, what are some ideas for future research? And try to be a little more creative than, we should do free future research on how this would work in a bigger population, how this would work with an older population, how this would work with women, how this would work with men. Try to think of something a little bit more creative. And you should have a little bit of a grasp on the literature at this point, because you will have actually looked at some of the literature from before. So maybe you'll have some idea of what might be interesting to look at in the future. And then you want to conclude with a final brief paragraph, kind of summing everything up. It doesn't have to be long. It can be, quite a short paragraph. But in summary, we did not find a difference. In summary, we did find a difference, that kind of thing. Right. So that's essentially the discussion. It's pretty straightforward. You don't want to make it overly long. It is probably the most difficult part of the whole thing to write, because it requires some reflection on the study on your part, so you're going to have to think a little bit outside the box about, why was my study good? Why was my study bad? What could I have done better? How would this translate into future research? What does this mean? That's another good point that you can put in the discussion. What do your findings mean? Maybe you found the opposite. Maybe you found that unattractive people, the unattractive face in your study was more likely to get higher than the attractive face, and then you could speculate about why that might be. Why did you find a different effect? But it doesn't matter if you don't find an effect. It matters how you talk about your findings in an intelligent way that shows that you have some knowledge of the literature. So that's the discussion, and Joe and Eglantine will be able to help you with that if you have any more questions about it. But again, just discuss your main findings. How do your findings relate to previous literature? That can all be one paragraph. What are the strengths and weaknesses of your study? Another paragraph. Some ideas for future research, and then a conclusion. And if you don't have the words for a conclusion, you can just end that with a couple of sentences. It doesn't have to be a full paragraph. Finally, with the appendices, you must include a copy of your consent form, a copy of your debriefing form. Do not include all the consent forms and all the debriefing forms. Anyway, the participants should have these things themselves. But you want to include a hard copy of all those things with your hard copy. And you can talk about it, Appendix A, Appendix B, Appendix C, so you can relate this back in the material section. You want a copy of any questions you made up for the background section, a copy of what each condition looked like, if you did an experimental study. That is what the formatting template looks like, is what shows what each condition looked like. A copy of the spreadsheet filled in with your data, and I'm going to talk about this in a second. And you can label these Appendix A, Appendix B, and so on, and include a brief description of what we are looking at the top. Oh yeah, so at the top you're going to say this is the consent form or this is the debriefing form. It should be fairly self-explanatory. Appendix A, consent form. Appendix B, background questionnaire. Appendix C, control condition or attractive condition or unattractive condition or hijab condition. That's what it's going to look like. All right, do not include filled-in consent forms or questionnaires. That's going to take up a lot of room, and you cannot include it in your electronic copy. Okay, a couple of things to mention. One thing to mention is some people have difficulty getting all of this into a one file to upload on Turnitin. You can only upload one file electronically, so just make it all one file. If you have to include a screenshot, that's fine. If you have to put it all in one Word document, it just has to all be one file. So just or there is a way of actually getting files together and putting them into a PDF if you'd prefer to upload a PDF. I don't really mind, but Google will tell you how to do this on your particular machine, however you want to do that. And a copy of the spreadsheet filled in with your data. This is the thing that trips people up that I'm going to tell you about in a second. So how are you going to get the spreadsheet with your data filled in into your research report? Well, it doesn't actually have to be that complicated. So this is basically what you're going to do. You're going to go into your spreadsheet, and on a Mac, which is what I have, there's a shortcut, and I'll just show you how I'm going to do this. So I want to zoom out reasonably. We just want to get a feel for what your data look like. It doesn't have to be perfect. So this is the example spreadsheet that I made for you all, and on my machine, I click on these 3 buttons, and then I can do a screenshot like this. So I do a screenshot, and now I have a screenshot of this particular area. Click, and that's it. And so what I would do then is I would open up a new Word document. I'm just going to do this really quick. So this is a new Word document, and then all I do is I'd want to probably make this layout different. I'd probably want to put this in landscape layout. And you just press paste, and there it is. And you can make it bigger if you want to. A PC has a screenshot as well that you can do, but that's all we really need to. I just would like to see what your data look like, to see that you have data and that it all makes sense. I want to see what your what your data set looked like. The first page, you don't have to include both pages. If you want to include both pages, you can, but just the first page, that's what it's going to look like. And it might help if you made the margins narrower, because that's going to make more sense. So this is what this looks like. So I'm just going to go over this one more time. Right? So in the appendix, you want to include a screenshot of your data, and that's going to basically be, you're going to go into your data set, and you're going to make a screenshot of this first page, not the graph, but this first page. And that's going to depend on your machine. So on my computer, it's Control-Alt-Shift, like this. That's actually too much. You really only need this bit here. Great. That's essentially everything that you need to put in your appendix. So that's the screenshot of your data. That's everything about the research report. Now I'm going to just go on and review avoiding plagiarism again. And right, so remember to include all these bits. All of this is in a research report overview. Obviously you have this video, and you have meetings with Eglantine and Joe and everybody next week if you need them before Wednesday to get every last thing sort of straightened out if you need it. Okay, finally, avoiding plagiarism. Phrase ideas in your own way. When possible, don't use more than 3 words in the same order. Always cite and credit a source that you've used. If you use someone's exact words, put them in quotes and give credit. And I have changed the Turnitin settings a little bit so that if you copy 3 words from somewhere else, it doesn't matter, but just don't use more than 3 words in a row. And one way of avoiding plagiarism is to take very good notes. So if you take good notes, then you'll know where the source of things is. If you paraphrase another's work, reorganize the thoughts in your own way. And if you're writing a paper, if you're writing a research report using copy and paste, make notes or do something, bold it or whatever, to make sure you've separated another person's words from your own. Always cite what you paraphrase. This is what an inline citation looks like. This is all stuff that you guys did in your critical review. I'm just going to put this back up for you on Moodle so that you can see it all. And yeah. So this is the citation. And what you're going to also want to do is use the APA manual. As many of you already know, many of your courses already require you to cite things in APA format. I'm not a huge stickler for referencing. I don't think it's that important really, but you want to make sure you do that. So this is what a citation would look like. I do think I went over this with you all before, but this is what a citation would look like. He states, anything takes on new meaning when we think of it as a monument. You put a space in, then you put in this is for a book. And so this sentence has both a direct quotation and a paraphrase, right? So that's the direct quotation. Anything takes on a new meaning when we think of it as a monument, and adds that monuments can be both man-made and natural. That's fine. Okay, I do think I've gone over this before. It's all going to be available for you on Moodle. So, and also you're only going to have a very brief part of your research report that is anything where you're going to be needing to paraphrase or include quotations, which is your introduction. You will need to include a reference list in your research report. It's at the end of the paper, and it provides the full information necessary to identify and retrieve each source. And most of you guys did your references okay last time. You want to put them in alphabetical order. APA says that you should use a hanging indent, and you always want to have the author's name first. I'm not a huge stickler for how you cite me, so APA manual actually has some indicators of how to cite lectures, how to cite online materials, how to cite a web page. That's all fine, and you're not going to be marked down severely for how you cite things. So don't worry about that too much. What we're really interested in is you having a really good research report that shows some thought and creativity, and that you were being rigorous scientifically, and that you considered third variables, that you considered how you did your procedure, all of the stuff that we've been teaching you in the entire unit thus far. So that's everything. Go back to the first slide. And obviously I put in plagiarism overview. If you have any questions, obviously use the message board as you have been using. You can email me or Eglantine or Joe if you need any more help. They have posted times when they can make appointments. I have office hours as well, Tuesday and Wednesday, 4 to 5. Obviously, next Wednesday, the office hours will be too late, but Eglantine and Joe will have office hours available for you before your report is due on the Monday and Tuesday if you need them. All right. Thank you. Bye.